Well, we've got a 42-hour window. What do you think's going to happen?
What is absolutely essential is that the message gets across to legitimate protesters that they are now attached to an illegitimate movement. The people driving the protest do not have their intentions at heart. It is not about vaccine mandates for the organizers of these events. Those of you on the ground who do have these objectives, continue to push the government according to your preferences for COVID mandates. There is democratic movement on that front, but in a very short window of time, there will be a police response to illegal activity, regulatory response that will affect your livelihoods in terms of registering your trucks. The time to leave is now. And if we don't see movement, I'm very worried about the next level of response, which may involve a lot more force.
Do you think, hindsight is 2020, but do you think, Michael, that the Premier should have made this announcement days ago?
Those of us in the political and chattering classes have been calling for this since about the end of the first weekend of protests in Ottawa, where the vast number of more easygoing protesters cleared out of the city and the hardcore remained behind. I understand the reluctance of the Premier. This is unprecedented in Canadian history. It is not something that everybody immediately had their minds around in terms of the depth of the problem. Rather than criticize him, I will simply say that thank heavens he's now acted and provided some of the tools that are necessary for moving forward. Should we have done it earlier? Of course. Is it good we're doing it now? It's essential that we do it now, not another moment to waste.
It's essential. Final question for you this morning, Michael. What is your feeling around how this is going to end? Is it going to be peaceful? Do you think it could get ugly?
The larger number of moderate protesters, legitimate protesters who clear away, the less sovereign force that will ultimately be used to clear away those that have bad intentions. There is a core to this protest who wishes to provoke a violent response with the state because it will further their aims of recruiting people to far alternative right politics that are not interested in a well-functioning liberal constitutional democracy, not just here, but elsewhere in the world. The smaller we can get that number, the less force that the state will ultimately have to use. I'm afraid that the number may not get small enough for this not to get quite violent towards the end, but I'm very hopeful that sensible protesters will recognize now what's coming and clear away in large number.
Michael Kempa, thank you so much. Michael is an associate professor of criminology at the University of Ottawa. We want to go to Ottawa now. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver is joining us from the downtown outside of Parliament. Annie, has there been any reaction among the protesters to what we just heard from Premier Doug Ford declaring a state of emergency for the province of Ontario?
Yeah, Marcia, so far there really hasn't been much of a change to the protesters here. I haven't had a chance to go down and talk to any of them yet, but it doesn't seem like there really has been much of a reaction, at least outwardly, that we can notice just by sort of walking around.
Annie, it brings to mind whether or not these protesters are paying attention to how the media is portraying this story. Do they tell you that they're following along with many other Canadians, or are they just going about their business down where they are?
Well, from what I can tell from being here the last 2 weeks, a lot of the protesters do not like what they're calling the fake news media or the mainstream media. There's really a distrust of the mainstream media. We've even seen this in sort of the press conferences, if you want to call it that organizers have set up over the last 2 weeks with, networks like CTV not being invited. We've seen multiple times my colleague Glenn McGregor trying to go to these press conferences only to be shut out. There's even signs throughout this protest that says, a big X over cross of mainstream media. There's even a Bell satellite dish down there with a big X on it. So I think there really is a distrust. A lot of people have told us they don't like the way that we're portraying this. They don't like the fact that, we're not covering it as fairly as they would like. So in terms of whether they were watching today, not sure, but for sure the information from that press conference will get out through one channel or another.
Okay, Annie, are we expecting to hear from the Prime Minister at all today?
Well, potentially the Prime Minister will be around Parliament today, so perhaps. So right now, I don't think there's anything on his public agenda, but that doesn't mean that we won't necessarily hear from him. We know that he's on a call at 11 o'clock with NATO allies talking about the situation in Ukraine. His ministers are up at 11 o'clock talking about public health, and potentially they'll be asked about the bridge as well. And then there's, of course, question period. The Prime Minister often isn't there on Fridays, but you never know. Perhaps he will show up after all. We're not sure. I haven't actually looked at his public agenda, but I'm not sure.
Okay, fair enough. Annie, thank you for all that. State of emergency, we're just getting this in. Let's listen.
That the RCMP have sent their third additional supplemental deployment to assist the Ottawa Police Service in disengaging the convoy. We've also sent concrete reinforcements to Coutts, Alberta, and will continue to be there. But our number one priority is to ensure that we end the illegal blockades, that we ensure that we uphold the law, and that we ensure that we get trade and travel going again.
What is something that the Manitoba government asked of you for the Emerson crossing?
Well, first and foremost, I look forward to speaking with my counterpart later today in Manitoba, and he and his office have been in touch with my officials. I'm also pleased to see that there has been some negotiation to allow livestock trade continue to go through Emerson despite the blockade. So that has minimized the impact economically there. But it's important that law enforcement take the independent decisions that they're taking to enforce the law, as they will, and we'll continue to provide whatever resources that we can to assist at the Emerson Port of Entry.
With the Ford government's announcement, how do you see this announcement? What's your reaction? This news has been just published now, but I've had several discussions with my colleague in Ontario. I think there's a lot of cooperation between the different police agencies and the RCMP, and that's the important thing for me, that there be close collaboration between not only the governments, but particularly between the police services, because they are responsible for enforcing the law.